Through the details provided and my own frantic, obsessive research, I began to piece together the client's identity. I spent my weekends not in bookstores, but in the hushed, dusty archives of the Charleston County Public Library, poring over microfiche of old newspapers, searching forgotten genealogical records, cross-referencing every obscure detail, every name, every date. I found fragmented records, faded photographs, and forgotten family trees that hinted at a tragic figure from Charleston's past. Isabel Beaumont, a young woman from a prominent, but now almost forgotten, family who had mysteriously vanished in 1912. A disappearance officially ruled a runaway case, though rumors of foul play had persisted in hushed tones among the city's oldest families. The dates and events aligned unervingly with the autobiography. Isabel Beaumont. My client is Isabel Beaumont, and she's been dead for over a century. The realization hit me like a physical blow, cold and sharp, stealing the air from my lungs. The ghost stories of Charleston weren't just quaint. The spirit's presence became more palpable, more insistent. The whispers were clearer, sometimes forming fragmented sentences that directly responded to my thoughts or questions about the narrative. He lied, a soft voice would murmur, right beside my ear, when I typed a passage about a deceitful suitor. The fire, not an accident. Another would whisper, a chilling breath on my neck, when I wrote about a family tragedy. Object in my office might subtly shift, a pen rolling off the desk, a book falling from shelf with a soft thud, a cold spot forming directly where I intended to reach. I felt a cold touch, a breath on my neck, even when the windows were closed and the room was still. My cat, a usually placid Persian named Ink, became agitated, his fur bristling, his green eyes wide with unseen terror, hissing at empty corners, refusing to enter my office at night, preferring to sleep curled up in the hallway, just outside the door. He knew. The narrative reached the climax, the client's final, tragic moments. Not a disappearance, but a murder. Isabel Beaumont had been betrayed, poisoned by a jealous rival, her death covered up by powerful figures who wanted to protect their reputation. The details were excruciatingly vivid, filled with raw emotion, dictated with a chilling precision that could only come from the victim herself. As I wrote this part, the manifestations in my office became overwhelming. The whispers became screams, a cacophony of terror and rage, a symphony of torment. The words on the screen flashed violently, distorting into grotesque symbols, then reforming into clear, accusing sentences. The air grew icy cold, sucking the warmth from my bones and shadowy figures. Perhaps reflecting Isabel's tormentors or her final moments, appeared in my peripheral vision, their forms indistinct, but their menace. Palpable, pressing in on me that I realized the client wasn't just dictating their life story. They were reliving it, desperately trying to convey the truth of their death, to find closure, to be heard. Their story was unfinished because their life was unfinished, cut short by injustice, by deceit. They were using me as a conduit, a final voice to tell their truth, to expose the century-old crime, to finally lay their spirit to rest. But the spirit's presence became possessive. I felt its emotions, its anguish, its rage, seeping into my own being, overwhelming my senses. I started to feel drained, exhausted, my own personality fading, replaced by Isabel's overwhelming presence. My own voice started to take on Isabel's antiquated cadence, my thoughts tinged with her melancholic despair, her century-old grievances becoming my own. I realized the spirit was getting too close, perhaps trying to inhabit me, to finish its life, to exact its revenge, through me. I was becoming less Noah, and more Isabel, a terrifying fusion that I knew then that I had to finish the story, not just for Isabel, but for my own survival. I had to give the spirit its voice, its closure, before it consumed me entirely. I decided to write the true, horrifying ending that the spirit wanted revealed, the truth of her murder and the identities of those who covered it up. No matter the consequences, I sat down for the final dictation on a stormy Sunday night, the wind howling outside, rattling the old window panes, mirroring the maelstrom within my office. The spirit's presence was overwhelming, its voice a cacophony of whispers and screams, its anguish palpable, pressing in on me from all sides. The air was thick with cold and the phantom scent of old roses, almost suffocating. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a furious blur, driven by an unseen force. I wrote furiously, channeling Isabel's final moments, her last words, her desperate plea for justice, her final, agonizing breath. It was a terrifying act of collaboration, a battle for my own mind, a race against time, my sanity hanging by a thread. I typed the final word. The name of her murderer, the details of the cover-up, the exact location of her hidden grave. A profound silence fell over the room. The cold receded, the whispers faded, then vanished entirely. The oppressive weight lifted, leaving me gasping for breath, trembling but utterly miraculously alone. The spirit, having finally told its story, having finally found its voice, found a measure of peace and moved on. I felt a sense of profound emptiness, a void where her presence had been, but also a dizzying relief that I published the autobiography a few months later, under the anonymous client portal, as per the original agreement. The book, titled The Silent Witness, a Charleston memoir, became a minor sensation, praised for its historical accuracy and raw, unvarnished emotion. Historians were baffled by the previously unknown details. Critics lauded its unique narrative voice, but no one could trace the source. The Charleston police even reopened the Beaumont cold case, based on the new information, though the outcome remains a mystery to me that I left the ghostwriting business shortly after. I couldn't do it anymore. The act of truly giving a voice to a spirit had shattered my detachment beyond repair. The physical act of writing felt hollow, meaningless, without the spectral presence guiding my hand. My old life, my old self, felt distant, a forgotten manuscript. The experience left me permanently scarred. I still hear faint whispers in moments of stress or profound quiet, catch fleeting glimpses of shadows in my peripheral vision, or smell the faint scent of old roses when no flowers are near. I carry a piece of Isabel's story, her voice, her pain, within me, a permanent echo. The horror is that my job wasn't just about giving voice to the living, but about becoming a conduit for the dead. I am a ghostwriter, truly, forever connected to the spectral. I now understand that some stories aren't meant to be told, some truths are better left buried, and some clients never truly leave. And sometimes, late at night, when the Charleston wind howls, I wonder if Isabel's peace is truly permanent, or if another restless spirit will one day find my anonymous portal, seeking a voice for their own unfinished tale. The soft click of my mechanical keyboard was usually the most satisfying sound in my world, a rhythmic pulse accompanying the birth of someone else's story. My name is Noah Spencer, and by 38, I'd carved out a comfortable, if somewhat solitary, existence as a professional ghostwriter. My job was to give a voice to others, to tell their stories, to craft compelling narratives from their raw, often mundane, experiences. I prided myself on my meticulous research, my ability to inhabit different personas, and my unwavering professional detachment. I viewed my work as a craft, a highly skilled trade, not some mystical art. Logic was my compass, facts my bedrock. Anything I couldn't logically explain, I simply dismissed as a glitch in a matrix, easily ignored. I lived in a well-appointed but somewhat isolated two-story house in the historic district of Charleston, South Carolina, a city steeped in history and, ironically, ghost stories I dismissed as quaint tourism fodder. My weekends were usually spent lost in old bookstores on King Street, hunting for first editions or tinkering with vintage electronics in my garage, bringing forgotten machines back to life, a world away from spectral whispers. My routine was a carefully constructed fortress against chaos. Early morning coffee, a brisk walk along the Battery, then hours at my desk, lost in someone else's narrative that my current project, before it arrived, was a dry corporate memoir for a retired tech CEO from Silicon Valley. I was putting the finishing touches on a chapter about his innovative leadership, making his quarterly reports sound like epic sagas. It was the kind of work that paid the bills, kept my mind sharp, and reinforced my belief in the tangible, the explainable. The new commission arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, around 2:15 p.m., a notification blinking on my secure, anonymous online portal. This portal was my secret weapon, a discreet gateway for high-profile, discreet clients who valued absolute confidentiality. The initial message was brief, formal, almost stark, seeking a professional ghostwriter for a full autobiography. Strict anonymity required. Communication solely via this portal. Fee negotiable, but generous. The proposed fee was astronomical, a seven-figure sum, far beyond my usual rates. Enough to pay off my mortgage, invest comfortably, and never worry about another corporate drone's ego again. It was impossible to refuse. My pragmatic side, the one that always calculated risk versus reward, won out over any vague unease. Anonymous client, big payout, no direct contact? Sounds like a politician or a celebrity with a messy past. Standard ghostwriting fare, just higher stakes. The client began sending notes within hours of my acceptance. These were not typical bullet points or rough drafts. They were incredibly detailed, vivid prose, written in a florid, antiquated style, describing a life from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The voice was distinct, melancholic, and deeply personal. It spoke of Charleston's cobblestone streets before automobiles, of gas lamps flickering in the fog, of grand balls and hushed scandals, of the scent of magnolias heavy in the summer air. I was immediately intrigued by the challenge of capturing such a unique voice, a voice so utterly unlike the bland corporate jargon I was used to. It felt like stepping into a living history book that, I delved into the notes. I was struck by the unnerving specificity. The client described historical events. The Great Charleston Earthquake of 1886, the devastating hurricane of 1911, forgotten social customs like elaborate mourning rituals, and specific local landmarks that no longer existed, with an eyewitness's precision. The tremor that sent the gas lamps crashing in Mrs. Albright's parlor. The way the tremors made the very air hum with a low, guttural growl, like a beast waking beneath the city. I remember the exact crack in the plaster above the fireplace. The way the crystal decanter slid from the mantelpiece, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. These weren't details you'd find in history books. They were felt experiences, visceral memories. Even more unsettling were the intimate, personal details. Private conversations held behind closed doors, secret thoughts whispered only to a diary, hidden fears and emotions that no living descendant or diligent researcher could possibly know. The bitter taste of betrayal when my cousin, Eliza, with her false smiles and honeyed words, stole Papa's affections, convincing him to disinherit me. The quiet despair of watching my beloved garden wither in the summer drought. A reflection of my own fading hopes, the very petals curling in on themselves like dying dreams. These were raw, unfiltered memories, laid bare with aching clarity. I tried to research, cross-referencing names and dates, poring over old city directories and census records, but found no public records matching the client's unique life story, no prominent family that fit the description. It was as if this person had lived a life of profound significance, yet left no tangible mark on the official historical record. That I also noticed subtle shifts in the client's voice in the notes. Sometimes it was elegant and composed, a refined Southern lady or gentleman. Other times it was tinged with profound sadness, anger, or even a fleeting, irrational joy. It felt less like a consistent persona and more like raw, unfiltered emotion bleeding onto the page, as if the writer's mood was directly influencing the digital ink. That I started experiencing minor, easily dismissed anomalies in my office, particularly when working on a client's project late at night. A faint chill in the air, even with the heating on, that would vanish the moment I looked up. The fleeting scent of old roses, or sometimes pipe tobacco, quickly fading, leaving only the lingering smell of ozone from my electronics. The feeling of being watched, just beyond my peripheral vision, a prickle on the back of my neck that made me constantly glance over my shoulder. I dismissed these as fatigue, the quirks of my old Charleston house settling, or my imagination working overtime due to the intense, immersive nature of the material. Too much historical immersion. Noah, I tell myself, rubbing my temples, try to ground myself in the tangible. The whispers began. It was a humid Wednesday night, around 1 a.m., my office bathed in the cool glow of my monitor. I was struggling with a passage describing a childhood memory, the details feeling just out of reach, like trying to grasp smoke. Then I heard it, faint, desperate whispers like dry leaves rustling across a stone floor, coming from the air itself, from the corner of the room, from behind my shoulder. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, my breath held. They were unintelligible at first, like static on an old radio, but they seemed to guide me, offering forgotten words or phrases that perfectly fit the narrative. The taste of salt on the wind, the cry of gulls over the harbor, the rough texture of my nursemaid's apron. I typed them, and they were perfect, slotting seamlessly into the prose. I attributed this to creative flow, my subconscious finally connecting the dots. My brain is just working overtime, tapping into some deep well of creativity. I thought, try to ignore the persistent goosebumps on my arms, the sudden cold spots that would bloom around me. The whispers escalated. One night, a particularly dark and stormy Saturday, around 2 a.m., the wind howling outside, rattling the old window panes as I stared at a blank screen, struggling with a pivotal scene, a secret meeting in a forgotten alleyway during the Civil War. I had the general facts, but the emotional core was missing. Suddenly, words began to materialize, letter by letter, directly onto my document, as if typed by an invisible hand. The words were in the client's distinctive, antiquated style, describing the alley's oppressive darkness, the hushed voices, the glint of a hidden knife, the smell of fear and damp stone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum. I tried to rationalize it as a software glitch, a sophisticated hack, a prank by some rival ghostwriter. I pulled out my phone, recorded the screen, but the words vanished the moment I hit stop, leaving only a blank document. My logical explanations were wearing thin, fraying like old rope, exposing something terrifying beneath.